Friends, let me begin by thanking the students of CPS for reclaiming the space of this university for debates for which it was organized. As an ex-student of JNU, as an ex-student of CPS, I feel very proud of what you are doing. I wish to particularly compliment you for organizing discussion on this subject, because this is a subject that invites debate among friends. And it has been my old grudge against Indian public life that in India, friends never debate publicly. And I find it such a weakness of India's political culture, public culture. या तो लोग एक दूसरे को गाली देते हैं या एक दूसरे के साथ मिलकर जिंदाबाद मुर्दाबाद करते हैं. That shows something weak about our public culture. A good public culture is where friends engage in public reasoning. The problem with some of our debates is that friends sit down in the room कि यार मुझे पता तो है ये प्रॉब्लम तो है लेकिन ये ना पब्लिक में पोजीशन नहीं लेना चाहिए. I think we should take public positions. Public reasoning is at the heart of democracy. And I see today's discussion as contributing to that act of public reason, where friends have different positions and they offer public reasons for that. Publicity of this, making it public and offering reasons, is absolutely critical to making a society. So thank you for organizing this. When I say friends, I mean a social friendship that I happen to know Professor Harish Wankere, he's a friend, that Avinash I've known for 20 years, he's a friend. No, it's not just that friendship that I'm talking about. Our society is full of such friendships. It's also friendship because we stand on the same side of the divide when it comes to questions of social justice. We all, and I presume most of us, though everyone need not be the case, most of us stand for annihilation of caste as political agenda of this country. Most of us here stand for recognizing that deep inequality, that one of the most salient vector of inequalities in this country is caste, that it has not disappeared, that therefore affirmative action including reservation is necessary, although that is not sufficient. We need much more on that, but reservation being one of those things that is needed. That reservation, the implementation of the reservations has been very faulty, very flawed, very inadequate, and that the political establishment of this country has done whatever it has done grudgingly, against their will. They have been forced to do so, and at the first opportunity they find a way to bypass it. This is the truth, we all know it, and that is the starting point of the discussion today. But there is a difference. Both my friends were very polite not to express their disagreement very sharply, but because they probably know my position, I'll put it sharply. There is a difference about how, given all these agreements, we perhaps have different reading of the specific judgment of the Supreme Court. It is not so much a difference of the intent of the court. To be absolutely honest, I don't care. Judges के दिमाग में क्या है, क्या सोचते हैं, world view क्या है. Fortunately, it's not Thomas Hobbes's text, which I have to understand text and intent and things of this kind. As far as Supreme Court orders are concerned, My only interest is in the operational order, in the arguments that inform that written or arguments. उनके दिल में क्या है वो अपने दिल में ले जाए, मुझे फर्क नहीं पड़ता. The order, the arguments, and the consequences. Honestly, I'm more interested in the consequences of this judgment than the intent. But we do have a different reading. I have said, and I still maintain, that the Supreme Court order on sub-classification of scheduled caste and scheduled tribe is actually a very progressive and muchly needed order. I welcome it, I salute it, not the judges, I salute the judgment. And I think if justice is about ensuring that the least advantaged have first rights over claims, then this judgment serves that cause. And therefore, I support that judgment. There is absolutely no doubt in my mind about it. It so happens that I have some involvement in this case, very marginal. For the last 20 years, I have been involved with a movement in Punjab and Haryana of the Valmiki community. Avinash Bhai knows about it. It's Adi Dharm Samaj, but not the old Adi Dharm Samaj that you read about in history. It's a recent movement of the Valmiki community, of mostly Safai Karamcharis. I've been involved with them for now more than 20 years. I now remember more than 20 years because when the 2004 judgment came, they came to me and said, "Ye kya ho gaya hai, sir?" Because as Professor Avinash reminded us, from 1975 onwards, Punjab already had in its rules, in its statutes, a policy that allowed the state to recognize that they were most disadvantaged within the SC. The Punjab policy was not of hard categorization. From what I remember, the Punjab policy was about prioritization. The policy basically said that you have to give first preference to the least advantaged, but if you don't get enough there, then you give it to the rest. In fact, I quite like the policy, and I would finally advocate something of that kind. And then Haryana followed, Bihar had a policy, and finally in Andhra Pradesh, because of the Mala Madhika dispute, this policy came in Andhra Pradesh. And when it came in Andhra Pradesh, then it reached the judicial radar. It was brought to the Supreme Court. And in the 2004 judgment, the Chennai judgment, the Supreme Court basically said, any state policy that subcategorizes scheduled caste or scheduled tribe is unconstitutional. This was the judgment. So what that judgment did was that it prevented the possibility of any scheme, any sub-quota, any government scheme which would recognize the existence of differentials within the scheduled caste. This had very serious adverse impact on the condition of Mahadalits, if you want to call them. That's a recent word. The word did not exist then. It had a very serious impact on that. I'm glad Avinash pointed out that actually there is empirical evidence to show that when Punjab practiced that policy of dividing Dalit population into two categories, A and B, as a result, and the basic division in Punjab is Ravidasis, who are muchly advanced, and Valmiki and Majbis, who are substantially behind. That's basically there are lots of castes, but these are the two big chunks. And when that policy was implemented, there is sociological evidence, there is a social scientific evidence, and there is an administrative evidence that the proportion of Valmikis and Majbis, who are the most disadvantaged, it actually improved substantially. So, there was a reality There was a policy. The policy had demonstrated positive impact, and then the Supreme Court said it's unconstitutional. For 20 years, all such policies were stopped. They were stopped in Punjab. Punjab tried to do a backdoor version of it, Punjabi backdoor version of it. Obviously, it had to fail because the Supreme Court had a verdict against it. Haryana tried, did not work. There's a Supreme Court verdict. So for 20 years, an injustice has been perpetuated because of a Supreme Court judgment. I call it injustice because the E.V. Chennaiya judgment of 2004 was a super technical judgment. The judgment did not even get into the sociological facts of whether there is heterogeneity in education and jobs or not. The judgment does not even look at the evidence of differentials that exist. The judgment did not get into the fairness or unfairness of it. The judgment took a completely ultra technical position, and the position was, here is a schedule, that is to say, a list made in the Constitution. The moment you subdivide it into two, you are tinkering with the Constitution. Do it through a constitutional amendment, nothing else will do. It's a super technical judgment, a wrong judgment, because it was a very peculiar reading of Article 341 and 42. So to my mind, what the Supreme Court has done is simply reversed an injustice of 20 years. I said I had something to do with the case because when that happened, then there were attempts were made to, the only way is you go to the courts again. This case has come up again and again in the courts. Started in 2008, came in 2014 when Justice Lodha was the CJI. He said, yes, there's something weird about this judgment, but I can't do anything. Let's form a bench. Then it came in 2020 when Justice Mishra, who I have no reasons to be fond of, Justice Mishra gave a judgment. Again, a strange ultra-technical judgment saying sub-quotas are permissible. But again, it was a very technical judgment. For the first time, but Justice Mishra gave a judgment in favor of sub-quota, but the problem was that his bench was also a 5-judge bench. So he said, but I cannot overrule, a 5-judge bench cannot overrule a 5-judge bench. Now a layperson like me says, bhaiya court, ye sun kyon rahe the itne saal se, if you can't give a judgment. But anyway, judges know these things, I don't know. But then 7-member bench was formed. So let us recognize what has happened. A long-standing differential has been addressed. A 20-year-old injustice has been reversed. Please remember, Supreme Court has not said that you will have to have sub-quotas. No, nothing of that kind. Supreme Court has not done the division. The Supreme Court has merely said that if any state government wants to do this sub-quota, then there is no constitutional bar on it. That's all. It's very important to understand these things because we sometimes think, because I hear people saying, why is the judiciary doing what the parliament should be doing or legislatures should be doing? Judiciary is not doing anything of that kind. Judiciary is doing what judiciary should do, namely to interpret the constitution and saying, earlier you had said there is a complete bar on it, now they are saying there is no bar. The decision about whether sub-quotas should be done or not still resides with the executive as it should, still resides with legislatures as it should. The court has simply said, yes, if you want, you can do it. What are the arguments for or against? But in one thing, let me begin by underlining one more agreement. I do agree that there is one element of judicial overreach. I don't think the main judgment is judicial overreach at all. But there is one element of judicial overreach that should be rejected, which is the creamy layer thing. The Supreme Court, and then I would like us not to confuse the creamy layer thing with the subdivision part. There are two very different parts to this judgment. The main judgment is on whether scheduled caste can constitutionally be divided into more than one part for purposes of reservation. That's what the main judgment is about. That was the real question before the court. The court said yes. Besides this, the court also has passed remarks. 4 judges have passed remarks on creamy layer. 4 judges have said, just as you have creamy layer in the case of OBC, just as you exclude creamy layer from the benefits of OBC reservation, similarly, you should exclude creamy layer from the benefits of scheduled caste reservations. I beg to disagree on 3 grounds. And on that, I think I'm with both my colleagues completely. Number 1, because actually this was not a case this was not an issue before the court at all. When you have a case in the courts, right in the beginning, the court frames issues and says, these are 3 or 4 questions we are going to answer. Creamy layer was not one of those questions before the court. Suddenly, the judges, in their wisdom, have answered a question that was not posed to them. 4 of them have answered it. The other 3 don't think this question needs to be addressed because it's not in front of them. Justice Chandrachud himself has not addressed this question at all. So that's my first problem with the creamy layer judgment. That why are you answering a question which was not there in the court? Number 2, I do not think, sociologically speaking, we have any evidence of a creamy layer being formed in the scheduled caste. I have probably a difference with many of my colleagues sitting here because I actually have not objected to creamy layer in the case of OBC. I do believe, and we can debate it, I think there is reasonable sociological and observational evidence to say that you do have creamy layer in some OBC communities. In the case of scheduled caste, it would be completely inappropriate to do so because to my mind, creamy layer requires 3 things. Number 1, it requires a social status of a kind which is undisputed. सड़क पे जब चलो तो किसी की मजाल नहीं हो कि मेरी तरफ उंगली उठा के दिखाए. That's 1. Second, creamy layer requires ability to intergenerational transfer of that status. सिर्फ मैं नहीं, मेरे खानदान के बारे में कोई उंगली नहीं उठा सकता. That's the second. And third, it requires thick social networks. To my mind, in the case of scheduled caste in India, while you find some families who you could say are creamy layer, but I do not yet see that those isolated drops of cream forming itself into a layer. Just to continue with that metaphor, it's a bad metaphor, I've never liked the word creamy layer, but just to continue with that metaphor, it's those little drops that you find, but not a layer. If you really want to compare, and pardon me for continuing with this metaphor, तो जब चाय पीते हैं ना, तो चाय पी थोड़ा सा ठंडी हो जाती है अगर चाय, तो हल्की सी उसमें झिल्ली सी बन जाती है, जिसे हम उठा के निकाल देते हैं. वो मलाई नहीं होती, वो एक झिल्ली सी है. In the case of scheduled caste, yes, you can find that tiny little film, but to say that a layer has formed, to my mind, is sociologically inappropriate. There is no evidence, unless someone demonstrates this evidence. I don't find that creamy layer. And my third objection is that introducing incidentally, creamy layer could well form after 25 years. I really hope that it forms because every community needs it. But don't do it now. Wait for 2 or 3 decades, check it again, and then do it. My third fear is that because of premature introduction of the idea of creamy layer and exclusion of creamy layer from benefits of reservation, the real effect will be that when it comes to upper jobs, class 1 jobs, when you have to appoint a professor in JNU, a professor in, senior doctor in AIMS, someone in IIT, all the eligible applicants will be from the creamy layer. And you actually wouldn't get applicants from outside the creamy, what you're calling creamy layer. So this can become a ruse, this can become a ploy, this can become a conspiracy to actually eliminate reservation altogether from the top sector. That is a very real and genuine fear, and therefore my position is that number one, as I read, we can have different readings of the judgment. My reading is that creamy layer is still not an order of the Supreme Court, but it is potentially a legal weight. 4 judges have said something which can be quoted anytime. So I would like this sub to be taken to the court for review, for the court itself to clarify that this is not an order. And in case the court fails to or refuses to clarify it, I would want the Parliament of India to overrule, to bring a legislation, clarify that creamy layer does not apply in the case of SC or ST, full stop. So there I completely agree with my friends, and much of what has been said. In fact, I find that much of the criticism of this judgment has been on the creamy layer issue, and somehow we have transferred that criticism on the case of the subdivision itself. These are two. So having said it, now let me come to the main judgment. The main judgment is not about creamy layer, it's a side issue. The main judgment is about subdivision of SC and ST. Why do I think it's a good, it's a muchly needed progressive step? Is the following. Number one is the question of principles. To my mind, there are 2 strong principles for affirmative action, 2 routes through which you defend affirmative action. One is fairness, the other is representation. The fairness principle, if you go to John Rawls, in case you have any interest in those things, is about putting the least advantaged first. So if the principle is about least advantage to be put first, or if you don't like John Rawls, if you like Mahatma Gandhi's vocabulary, कल्पना कीजिए कि आप जिंदगी में सबसे कमजोर किस व्यक्ति को मिले हैं और सोचिए कि इस नीति से उसे फायदा होगा या नहीं. ताबीज, दिस इज गांधीज ताबीज. They are actually the same. I really cannot think of any group which would be, I mean, there is one, but I'll talk about that later. If we see of Indian society as hierarchy, inequality within inequality, those who are placed at the bottom of this hierarchy are going to benefit from the Supreme Court judgment. And for me, that logic trumps everything else. It works for the least advantaged. That's a moral argument, fairness argument. Second is a representational argument, which is to say which is politics of presence, that any government, any legitimate government must reflect the profile of the society in which it exists. That actually is the argument behind SC/ST reservation in parliament and legislatures. Now, if that argument applies in the case of SC and ST, and if you ask my Valmiki friends from Punjab and Haryana, if you ask Madigas from Karnataka and Andhra, if you ask Arundhatiyars from Tamil Nadu, they would tell you, what have we got out of these MPs and MLAs? We are not there. This is a fact. No one can deny it. If anyone wants to contest, please tell me. The fact is that there has been absolute minuscule representation of all these communities within the SC/ST reservation. They have a grouch, they have a grudge, they have a deficiency. They want it on this absolutely the same argument on which we claim SC/ST reservations. So both on grounds of fairness and on grounds of representation, I think the case for sub-quota is justified. Come to the legal part. So on grounds of principle, on grounds of law. On grounds of law, I've already clarified that Supreme Court has not, in judging the question of sub-quota, there is no judicial outreach. There is overreach. There is overreach in the case of creamy layer issue. Sub-quota is absolutely what judges ought to be deciding. I do not think there is an overreach. Secondly, to argue that Article 341 and Article 342 postulate a homogeneous category that cannot be tinkered with is just bad argument. Just show me in the law. Where does it say? All that it says is the President of India shall, create this schedule. It does not say you cannot, changing the schedule is different. Yes, if you want to insert a new caste, then you have to go to the parliament. And of course, if you want to create quota within SC or ST for purposes of central government jobs or for purposes of JNU, you have to go to the parliament. But if in order to do it in Bihar, if Bihar government wants to see that its own, that for jobs and educational opportunities within Bihar, if they see that their own SCs belong to two different categories, then I don't see how does it violate the constitution. बिल्कुल वो तो बाल की खाल उधेड़नी हो तब तो हो सकता है argument. Otherwise, I really don't see the argument there. Just read the plain text of the constitution. Third is an empirical argument, which Harish Bhai alluded to. Where is the evidence? In fact, that's been asked again and again. In the last week or so, many scholars have said, Professor Ashwini Deshpande has also written to say, good decision, but how would you implement? Where is the evidence? Frankly, I'm actually surprised. The evidence is right under our nose. And I'm not speaking of observational evidence. I'm not speaking of those things. वैसे तो आप घूम लीजिए, आपको सब पता होगा. मैं बिना कुछ जाने JNU के बारे में दावा कर सकता हूं कि JNU में SC कोटा से जितने भी स्टूडेंट्स का एडमिशन हुआ होगा, उसमें से इन कैटेगरीज के लोग 20% भी नहीं होंगे. 1/5 of the quota would be taken by them. 3/4 of the quota would be taken by other communities. Why do I say so? Because there is census evidence. I'm absolutely surprised that we, in this country, you have public debate which does not cite the most obvious public data, namely the census of India. Many people have said, जब तक caste census नहीं होगा, तब तक हमें कैसे पता लगेगा? The simple fact is, because they are social scientists, I really want all of you to know. Yes, there is no caste census of India for all the caste and communities. Precisely because of that, people like me are advocating it, demanding it. But please remember, a full caste census always takes place for the scheduled caste and the scheduled tribe. And the data has always been available for the last 70 years. Today's Hindu, please read the Hindu of today. On the op-ed page, there is a data point, an article by my former colleague Sanjeev Alam, that simply presents the data for 5 states. And just notice the shocking inequalities within that. So, from the census of India, we not only know the population size of different jatis within SC, we also know their educational status. We know how many of them are agricultural labor. All this data is available. And the data is shocking. I'll just give you an evidence from Punjab, it was referred to. So if we look at Punjab, and this is from 2011 census, there are, in Punjab, the broad division is Ravidasis, which is the name for leather working communities in Punjab. Ravidasis, Jatavs, that's the name. In Punjab, if you look at proportion of graduates within Ravidasis, per 10,000. I'm using per 10,000 because it saves the trouble of decimal percentage thing. So per 10,000 population among Ravidasis, the number of graduates is 305, which is to say 3.05%. What is the percentage among Valmikis, the Safai Karamcharis? 126, 1.26. How much is the difference? दुगने से ज्यादा है फर्क, आधे से कम है उनका. Don't stop here. Take one more step because you've studied them. Majbis. What is the proportion among Majbis? 60 what? 0.61%. Compare. Now this is scheduled caste within one state. We are not even comparing them to Maharashtra. Scheduled caste within one small state of Punjab, which is one of the small states of India. Look at the difference. 305 versus 61. What is the ratio? 1:5. If this is not inequality, tell me what is inequality? If this is not evidence, what is evidence? This is Census of India evidence, which is not used, which is not cited, which is not talked about. And if you want to be shocked further, come to Bihar. What is the proportion, the same proportion, per 10,000 population? How many graduates do you have among Bhuiyas and Musahars? 5. 5 out of 10,000. 0.05%. And there are communities in Maharashtra where the number is 900 plus. Is this not inequality? Does it look like a homogeneous community? Does it look like absence of evidence to you? Just think about it. You know, the question of homogeneity is a bad question. Are JNU students homogeneous? You would say, of course not. Step outside JNU, everyone in the world believes all the JNU students are homogeneous, they are Naxals, they are Dadi, they are this, they are anti-national. You of course laugh at it because they see it from outside, you see it from within. Homogeneity or lack of homogeneity is not a function of what exists outside. It's a function of what question do we ask. Are Dalits homogeneous? Yes, they are homogeneous in one respect, that they've all suffered one of the grossest injustice of caste system. Almost all of them, all the scheduled castes have suffered from untouchability. Not all, but almost all. So yes, they are homogeneous in that respect. But in this issue, my question is, are they homogeneous in their educational and job opportunities? That's my question, because I'm looking at reservations. In this, so that there has to be a relevant consideration. Asking, are Indians homogeneous? Well, when they live in the US, they look quite homogeneous. Are they homogeneous? They are not. So, the question should be homogeneous in which respect and in what context? In the context of educational opportunities and job opportunities, there is absolutely pakka evidence that there is nothing like homogeneity there. It is an inequality which is crying to be attended. If I speak somewhat passionately, the passion does not come from tables or from census or from my politics. It comes from 20 years of having watched Valmiki community of Haryana and Punjab and having seen what exists on the ground and having seen how they have been systematically denied opportunities. This needs to be addressed. I cannot imagine how a defender of social justice like my friends here would not wish to address this. Finally, the political question. Is it a ploy to divide Dalits? It's a conspiracy to divide Dalits. I would be careful before I use these arguments, because I would remember how Baba Sahib was attacked during the national movement. When Dr. Ambedkar asked this question, which was a very uncomfortable question at that time, of the situation of the depressed classes as they were called then, or the untouchables as he called them. What was the response of the national movement? Divide कर रहे हो. अरे हम अंग्रेजों के साथ लड़ रहे हैं, तुम आके डिवाइड कर रहे हो, खेल खेल रहे हो. What is the argument that we hear? I mean, for me, it's what 40 years of defending reservations now. When I was a student in this university, I came under the influence of, at that time, Ambedkar was not the thing in this university. To tell you the most shameful fact, in the course on modern Indian political thought, Ambedkar was not taught. So I've grown up in that generation. But I learned it from Lohiya. And then I learned caste and reservations. For 40 years, I have defended reservations. And what is the argument that I have heard again and again from those who attack reservations? यार ये डिवाइड करने वाली बातें क्यों कर रहे हो? Division is the moment someone asks for justice, the first accusation is division. This is what blacks in the US have been accused of. This is what Dalits in India have faced. I would really say, please think twice before you want to use this argument. मैं अपने दोस्तों से कहना चाहता हूं, यार 40 साल से जिस आर्ग्यूमेंट को हम नकार रहे हैं, and what has been my response? My response has been, there is no unity without justice. Any unity which is based on shoving under the carpet questions of deep injustice is no unity. And my argument has been, for me, unity is not a small thing. Unity is a very important thing for India, for Haryana, for Dalits, for everyone. Unity is an important consideration. But true unity is born out of solidarity. It is not born out of brushing inconvenient questions under the carpet. Remember, the feminists of this world have always faced this accusation. घर तोड़ रही हो. ये सवाल, ये लैंग्वेज हम यूज करना बंद कर दें. बहुत सुन लिए हमने ये लैंग्वेज. घर तोड़ रहे हो, ये कर रहे हो, डिविजन कर रहे हो. इंसाफ के सवाल का सीधा जवाब दो. आए बाएं करके मुझे जवाब मत दो उसका. So, I don't think it's a good answer. Solidarity is what I want. What would be the best way? Yes, the prospect of Dalit division worries me before coming here. And the reason why I got delayed was that I was in a meeting organized by Valmiki Samaj and Khatik Samaj, and they had organized a meeting in Delhi. And having told them about the judgment, my one appeal was that you have put Baba Sahib's picture in this room. Please do not cause a situation where Baba Sahib may have to cry and see that his children fighting with each other on the street. मैंने कहा कुछ भी हो जाए, लड़िए मत. Yes, we need solidarity. I understand solidarity. I understand the value. But solidarity comes when those who are in a relatively advantageous position stand up and say, it's your turn, let me get up. That is when solidarity begins. Mayawati ji, who has trashed this judgment, आप जरा सोचिए. Mayawati ji की politics से I don't agree at all, I must confess. But she's an icon nevertheless. My liking or dislike doesn't make a difference. She's an icon. For millions and millions, she's an icon. अगर मायावती जी ये कह देती कि नहीं, उत्तर प्रदेश में जाटव समाज को थोड़ा ज्यादा फायदा मिला है, अब वाल्मीकि समाज की बारी है, मैं उनके लिए एडवोकेट करूंगी, that would have created solidarity. You know, that is the kind of things we need. So please do not put the onus of unity on those who have suffered injustice. It's a bad argument. That is just stop using it. Finally, 2 or 3 things very quickly. There is a sense I would not get into the question of what is the overall character of Supreme Court of India and Indian judiciary. For me, a judiciary that cannot attend to Umar Khalid for 3 years, I don't need to hear very much about that. So it's not about whether Indian judiciary is good or bad, what is its character, we all know that. I'm interested in one judgment and its consequences. I should also incidentally say that in the otherwise very mixed record of Indian judiciary on questions of human rights, on questions of justice and equality, Indian judiciary's support for caste-based reservation is actually an exceptional thing of Indian judiciary. If you compare Indian judiciary, for example, to the judiciary in the US, judiciary in the US has been obnoxious on this question. They have consistently prevented any serious affirmative action to take place. Indian judiciary, on the other hand, has some stellar judgment. N.M. Thomas, great judgment. Even Indira Sahni, I thought, was a great judgment on balance. So, to my mind, one of the biggest exceptions was the EWS judgment, which is a judgment waiting to be reviewed. That judgment flies in the face of the logic of reservations. But if you actually read this judgment, and I read it, in fact, Justice Chandrachud for the first time is taking arguments of affirmative action one step further. You have an advocacy of substantive equality, something which is implicit in the N.M. Thomas judgment. Justice Chandrachud actually takes that one step forward. And in this judgment, you have, to my mind, the best defense so far of reservations against the argument of merit and efficiency. To my mind, this particular judgment is the best defense of reservations that has come in this particular count. So to say that this is anti-reservation judgment, I don't know. Please show me the text. Yes, I know Justice Mittal has said a few things which seem to belong to a different age and time, but that's not the judgment of the court. That's not a judgment of 6 judges. Even Justice Bela Trivedi, whose track record on other things has been questioned, who has disagreed with this judgment, even her judgment does not show any streak of any anti-caste reservation thing in the judgment. I could be wrong, it's a very fat and long judgment, but please enlighten me, show me paragraphs of that judgment which actually go against. I've spoken for long. I would just say one thing and end what I'm saying. Now, there's something that affects all of us, and this is my plea to my friends. As I said, I've been in this for 40 years. I know the arguments that have been used against reservations. I know the kind of mentality that has worked against social justice and reservation. In this place, I can get away with these arguments, but I know if I were to be in another institution, what kind of reactions would I get for my advocacy of reservation, for my advocacy of caste, census, and so on. I would say, it's my appeal, forget all the arguments. It's my appeal to all those who have stood for social justice. This is a moment of test. I'm a Yadav, and when I say OBC reservations are great, most people think, "Arey Yadav hai, aisa hi bolega hi na." They believe, erroneously so, that I must have got into JNU and on OBC quota. There was none at that time. They believe, erroneously so, that my children must be benefiting from OBC reservations. They don't and they cannot because creamy layer provision applies, thankfully. But the impression is, okay, this man speaks for reservation. There is, well, I can see why. I know his name. What is the real test? Whether I stand for people who share my accident of birth, people from my own caste, or do I stand for social justice? That is tested when instances of oppression against Dalit, violence against Dalit comes from UP. And you know the caste which is involved most in any instances of oppression against Dalits. What does Yogendra Yadav say then is the test of whether he stands for social justice or whether he stands for his own community. I would simply say, I may succeed in that test, I may fail in that test, but I do not want my Ambedkarite friends to fail that test. This is a moment of test. गाड़ी में घुसने के बाद सबकी इच्छा होती है, जब घुसते हैं तब हमारी एक मनस्थिति होती है ना, खोल खोल दरवाजा, क्यों नहीं, सबकी है, पब्लिक की ट्रेन है, तेरे बाप की है क्या? और पता नहीं क्यों डब्बे के अंदर जाते ही हमें कुछ अलग दिखने लगता है कि बहुत क्राउड हो गया, हाउ कैन वी टेक मोर? This happens all over the world. This happens with everyone. And the real test of whether you stand for a principle or not is what you do when you are inside, not what the big things that you say when you are outside. This is a test for all of us. The real test, and this test does not apply only in this case. जब मैं अभी आज शाम को उनके साथ बात करके आया हूं, तो मैंने उनको भी कहा कि आपका टेस्ट ये होगा कि जब घर में जाके औरत के साथ जो होता है, उसके बारे में जब कोई बोलेगा तो आप उसकी बात सुनेंगे कि नहीं सुनेंगे, है ना? There is no one in this world जिसके नीचे कोई नहीं है सोशल हायरार्की में. How you relate to those below you is a test of whether you stand for social justice or not. This is a moment of reckoning. This is a moment of test. I do not want us to fail. I do not want the world to laugh at those who spoke for social justice. I want true solidarity. Solidarity which is born out of working together, sharing grief. दर्द से दर्द का रिश्ता बनाने से सच्ची एकता बनती है. I want to see that. Thank you very much.
Inequality is everywhere. It's not that we are not recognizing that within the SC and ST community there are not a community which has more number of graduates and there are other communities which have less number of graduates. My point is that when you wrote the article in Indian Express the next day when the judgment came, calling it a landmark judgment, it has disappointed us. Why? Because there is a phrase in English that you are missing the wood for the tree. It is very, you wrote the article and you cited the example from the Bihar, that here is a Baita, here is a Dhobi community from the Bihar which has more jobs and Muslim community has got less jobs. If you look at the same questions vis-a-vis people who are called general category, people who are called Savarna, people who are called upper caste, and if you compare how they have captured the public institutions, the media, the business and industries, the places where you have worked, you will find that 10% or 15% upper caste people have completely monopolized everything. Recently, even the government has said that only 4% OBCs are there in a central university. How many SC and ST vice chancellor you could find? Recently, the inequality lab report has come in which it was very much clear that 10% upper caste people have kept 90% share as far as the billionaire is concerned, and as far as ST community is concerned, there is no billionaire as that. So my point is that you are missing how the public sector, private sector is being completed. 97% private sector CEO come from the Brahmins and from the Baniyas caste. The sad part of this judgment is that somehow this judgment is trying to put a few castes from the Dalit community and ST community which have got some jobs by managing, by overcoming hurdles, as if that they are traveling in first class train and their co-members, the members of their community are trying to get a seat and they are just throwing them out. That is very wrong way to look it. Till today, 70% of Dalits are landless laborer. So what is happening? that judiciary is taking the wrong questions at the right time and right questions at the wrong time. This is, and I also disagree with you. You have said that our judiciary is very progressive. Judiciary has not been progressive as far as the social justice is concerned. The Indra Sahni judgment which you are celebrating, in the same Indra Sahni judgment, the court has also said that a merit reservation is not against merit or merit is not against reservation. But it has also said that in the super special center, reservations cannot be given, and that was used by the casteist people to deny reservation for the OBC community in JNU till 2007. My point is that by welcoming such judgment, what we are trying to do, we are getting trapped in the game of the ruling classes. We are fighting among ourselves, and the bigger questions about why all the general seats are being contested by the upper caste who are 10% people, why reservations is not there in the private sector. We are not taking our fight to their zone. Instead, we are responding it, and I think this is very negative. And your article that you wrote that it is a landmark judgment, somehow you are also upholding that politics, and by just taking final positions, no, here I am with you, there I disagree with you, you are missing the larger questions. Even if you read the text of Angels, he has said the moment you enter the court, do not forget the point that court is not so innocent. Your social location is going to determine how the judge is going to give the judgment. I find that the fight should be that why we are not getting reservation in the private sector. The private sectors are using all the resources here. You should write an article about why reservation is not there in judiciary,
Right.
which is trying to appear very fair. So the point is you are absolutely free to talk about the rights of the Valmiki community. Nobody is against the Valmiki community. But tell me, in your category, I come in your category. Can I fight with those people who are in the UR category? Why not there is a sub-categorization within the UR category? My father is my friend, and I have somehow come to JNU, but I am not able to get the job. In Delhi University, my friend told me that get the EWS certificate, you will be able to get the job. Somehow, I got the EWS certificate. My number in the Delhi University was I was in the first category of Delhi University. My name was first. The only person in the EWS category was Abhay Kumar, but he could not get the job. So I find that at least the upper caste have no right to talk about fairness in this country. The first thing we should try to think, we should try to look into that how within the so-called unreserved category is reserved for the 3 or 4 or 5 upper caste, and among those upper caste, how many families are there who are monopolizing all the jobs from due to Hyderabad, and even a large section of people from the upper caste also, they are also being denied. So instead of asking questions from the Dalit community, which is still 70% landless level, we are not taking out the larger question, and politics should never be missed out from the judgment of any judge. Thank
Very
you.
good with your commentary because this issue is very close to my heart as well. So I am going to first of all thank you so much to all the speakers for enlightening talk, and I'm also very mesmerized by Yogendra sir's charm and the humbleness, your sweetness. But I would hope that this won't stop me to disagree with you on certain points.
Just keep the mic slightly away.
Yeah.
It's easier.
Right. So I would like to go to the reading of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar where he talks about caste as a graded inequality. So when the homogeneity or argument is like the argument comes. So I'm deriving my argument from that caste is a graded inequality and caste is an ascending order of relevance and descending order of content, right? So I also resonate with your 20 years of struggle with the Valmiki community, and no one is against the most oppressed of the society. But when we talk about caste and the caste system, and as we were having a discussion within our friend circle, so we treat caste not as caste or a caste system. So why is a Dalit is only being compared to a Dalit and not to an upper caste or a Brahmin or a Baniya or a Thakur? And what is this argument of dominant? I'm leaving aside the argument of criminal because I don't adhere to that argument at all. But this argument of sub-categorization and the argument of some communities or castes who have got this benefit. So I would like to point out, maybe I'll be wrong in that, please correct me if I'm wrong, that 8% of organized sector and 92% of unorganized sector, right? And in that 3% is government and 5% is private. So in that clear 3% there is this representation. And the rest private don't have an unorganized sector, we all know how it works, right? And these are the disagreement with the judgments that I had. But the disagreement that I have with you is that you said that this is 20 years of injustice, and you have pointed out injustice 2 or 3 times, and you are focused on that. So I'd like to point out that it's not 20 years of injustice, but 5,000 years of injustice that we are facing, right? And the onus should not be on the oppressed community. I would also like to point out if there are some communities that have been left behind, isn't that the state's responsibility to go to those people, and also we are in complete solidarity with those communities and the sub-caste, but isn't that the responsibility of state to provide public education to them, to give them proper health, to give them proper education? And then you talked about Ronzian principle of wheel of ignorance and justice, right? And you also said that Gandhi believed the सब जो सबसे आखिर में होना चाहिए उसको सब मिलना है उसको सबसे पहले मिलना चाहिए. तो then on that logic sir, separate settlement और separate electorate के लिए उनको धरने पे नहीं बैठना चाहिए था, पूरा बैठ साइड नहीं होना चाहिए था. And you also talked about the division argument, that this argument is like dividing the community. We should not turn the argument that, and you rightly pointed out that division of factor तो कभी होना नहीं चाहिए. But the same judgment, in the same judgment, there is paragraph in which there is written that गीता में लिखा है कि वर्ण सिस्टम में कभी जाति नहीं होती थी. Then in modern democratic state there was no caste, and after the reservation policy, caste solidified itself. So isn't that divisive? And and the testing of you also mentioned about the test of the Ambedkarites. How long should we be tested? That is also my question.
My
सर बट हमें भी मौका दीजिएगा सर.
sorry.
हमें भी मौका मिलना चाहिए बाद में. और सेशन 10 बजे तक
That's
है.
between you and her.
Sure, sir.
Nice to
Everybody.
hear you all. Thank you for reminding me of most of the things that I have been writing. In fact, most of what you said is exactly what I have written not once, not twice, maybe 15, 20 times. And thanks for requesting me to write on reservation in judiciary. Actually, I wrote about it 15 years ago. There was a report which was by a parliamentary committee on the status of reservation in Indian judiciary. And I wrote an article on that committee's report and how unrepresentative India's judiciary is. So I have already fulfilled many of your commands. I'll try and fulfill the rest as well. I don't understand wood and tree, but in social science there is something called a error of level of argument. And the error is this. If I say Mr. Adani is so rich, you referred to the report on inequality. And you know Mr. Adani's response normally is conspiracy against India. That's a bad argument, isn't it? Why is that a bad argument? Not just because we hate Mr. Adani, because there is a confusion of level of argument. Because the argument about differences and inequalities within India is being clouded with an argument which belongs to a different terrain altogether. That I think is a mistake you may not want to commit as a student of social science. Uh, there are much of what you said, and also much of what both my friends said, is actually something that I've shared all my life. I've said it repeatedly again and again and again. So, by listening to what I have argued again, that doesn't respond to this particular tiny question. It's a small question. Your argument would be valid if I had said that sub-classification is the most important question of social justice in India, which takes precedence over everything else. Then your critique was absolutely valid. But it so happens that I've never said that. I don't believe in it. And in my own article, I actually say exactly the things that you want, that the real issue is about the overall quantum of reservation, the real substantive issue is about private sector, the real issue is about shrinking of public sector, the real issue is actually about how conspiracies are hatched to deny the scheduled caste quota, scheduled tribe quota. So we won't gain very much by repeating things that we agree. Let us be honest and talk about things where we disagree. I would really want us to learn the art of disagreeing with arguments, with public reason. And one temptation is the moment I have a small difference with my friend, I would say, you are actually my enemy. I knew for the last 10 years that you were my hidden enemy. Now, this is an old style argument that has been used. It's a very unhelpful argument for two reasons. A, it's untrue. B, it's counterproductive. So to specifically address some of the things that you have said, this question of vilification has come up again and again, and Harish also mentioned that. Where is vilification? If someone says, "Abhi main jahan meeting mein tha sham ko," there is a video of that. Please watch it. I said to them, "ये मत समझिए कि कोई आपको धक्का दे के आगे चला गया है. हुआ सिर्फ ये कि जहां ट्रेन रुकी, जहां बस का दरवाजा था, वहां कोई उस वक्त खड़ा था. तो नेचुरली जब दरवाजा खुला वो व्यक्ति पहले गया, और नेचुरली जो सड़क के उस पार था उसे आने में वक्त लगेगा." So the argument, this would have been the case if I had said, or if this judgment had said, that the relatively less disadvantaged are the oppressors of the more disadvantaged. There is nothing of that sort to my mind in the judgment, but maybe it's in the judgment, so much worse for the judgment. That's certainly not the case. So none of us is going to gain very much by pushing each other into a corner to which we don't belong. And let us have an honest argument among friends. Second, this thing about the argument about Gita, a judge saying Varna Vyavastha Gita, these are very offensive remarks. But if you remember, I had actually mentioned that in my speech. This is Justice Nissal's comment. And fortunately, not even the dissenting judge agrees with him in this remark. It's a remark of one judge out of 7. And you asked, please don't misunderstand what I'm saying. I'm not saying India's judiciary's record is great. No, I'm saying in the context of Indian judiciary's overall dismal record, its position on caste reservation somehow is not as regressive as in other things. I would have normally expected Indian judiciary to have taken a much worse position. Given the overall, if you look at the hegemony of the upper caste in this country, if you remember the anti-Mandal agitation, if you remember that the entire opinion-making section of this country was anti-Mandal, and then the Supreme Court gives a judgment which says it's all right, that flew in the face of upper class hegemony of this country. Now you could say that's also a ruling class conspiracy, that's all right. But the fact is, that the Supreme Court Mandal judgment was completely out of line with the upper class dominant sentiment of that time. This we cannot forget. And if you look at judicial pronouncements of this country, there have been, I would say, the dominant trend has been the one which has upheld caste-based reservations. There have been some judgments which are outliers. EWS judgment was one of those outlier judgments. So my question was, Devendra Singh versus Punjab, is it in the EWS line or is it in the NM Thomas line? And there is no doubt it is in the NM Thomas line. It is not in the EWS line. We can debate, we can look at the things. Except Mr. Mittal's judgment, which fortunately is one man's opinion against six. On the thing of 20, I would suggest, 20 years judgment, 20 years of injustice versus 5,000 years. I really would urge you not to use these arguments. अभी दो बार ताली पिट जाएगी, अच्छा लगेगा. You would realize there is no substance in this argument. An argument should be able to stand on its legs. I cannot say, if someone says, let's say, some Indian has gone and done something in the UK, and someone says, this person has done this, you would say, 200 years of colonialism. That's a bad argument, Address the question. We cannot, we should not sidestep the question. This happens to be a friendly debate, so I can say this. But even if it was unfriendly, the courage of your argument would be shown if you do not resort to this kind of rhetoric. This rhetoric is nice. कभी-कभी 10,000 की रैली में, मतलब खाने में थोड़ा सा मिर्ची हो और अचार हो तो अच्छा लगता है. खाने में सिर्फ अचार दे दिया जाए तो खाया नहीं जाएगा. I would really urge this about arguments. Argument में कुछ तो वो होना चाहिए. कब तक हमें टेस्ट किया जाएगा? नहीं. And I want to respond to what Harish ji said. But he said language of reprimand, ethical, moral, emotional. I admit I used emotional language in the last 2 minutes of what I said. And I said some argument करने के बाद मैं कहना चाहता हूँ. I'm not saying that emotional, if that is the only part of my argument, then you can say it's only emotional. I think I gave a lot of analytical things before I came to that emotional part. I'm not ashamed of that emotion because emotions drive politics. Emotion is an ethics. When I entered JNU, and I saw for the first time a picture of India, I had no idea. I came from a small town of Rajasthan. I had no idea of what Bihar is, what Odisha is, and so on. And I said, "Acha, ye hota is desh mein." So that is what brought me, before I read Baba Saheb, before I read Lohia, it was this basic ethical response to something which I saw was utterly unfair. आपका Marxism, आपका social justice, Ambedkarite ideology, we must admit that they are based on an ethical core. We should not be ashamed of that ethical core. We should. That is what. Otherwise, तो बिल्कुल simple है भैया. तुम्हारा जन्म उधर हुआ, मेरा इधर हुआ. तुम जानो अपना काम मैं क्यों करूं? That is not an argument. On the and the reprimand. Where is the reprimand? आपने बार-बार कहा. हो सकता है कुछ लोगों ने ऐसा कहा हो कहीं पे. But the only language I use is that of seriously disadvantaged and even more disadvantaged. Can we or can we not recognize that distinction? India and Nepal both are countries which are third world countries, both are poor countries. But is there no gradation between India and Nepal in the power that they exercise on the global arena? इस क्वेश्चन को अगर हम ये कहने के एड्रेस करेंगे, इंडिया फेस्ड colonialism, that's no answer to this. Just एक आधी और चीज है. You said upper caste has no right to speak about fairness. Once again, I like this rhetoric. But I actually think you are wrong. Uh, Everyone in this world should have right to speak about fairness. They should not have right to make false arguments about fairness. And those who have used unfairness for all this while should be made to pay the consequences of their unfairness. They should not be denied to speak about fairness. No one in the world. I would not deny it even to Mr. Trump, even if we were to speak for 5 minutes about fairness in the world. हर इंसान को हक होना चाहिए. ये बहुत कैसा आर्ग्यूमेंट है ये तो. ऑन
गांधी और मोदी सेपरेट एलोकेट सेपरेट सेपरेट.
हाँ, मगर उससे कोई मतलब क्या है? मैं तो सिर्फ इतना कहा था, गांधी, दिस वी आर नॉट डिबेटिंग पुणे पैक्ट हियर, एंड दिस पर्टिकुलर जजमेंट हैज नथिंग टू डू विद पुणे पैक्ट. We are debate. I invoked Gandhi only to say that many people, I could have invoked Christ. Many people have said that, and I completely agree, that on issues of fairness, the criteria should be the last person. Fairness should always be judged from the vantage point of the last person. I happen to have quoted Gandhi. I really admire and respect Gandhi. I happen to have quoted it. I could have quoted someone else.
Wasn't it the fact that it will divide the Hindu society as well?
That was Gandhi's argument, and it was such a wrong argument.
That is what I was contesting.
So in fact, you are saying what I am saying, because you are saying Gandhi's in Baba Sahib was asking question about fairness and justice, and Gandhi was responding to that with accusations of division. Do you want to do that today?
No, I don't agree with that.
बस नहीं तो मैं कह रहा हूँ, similarly, when today someone is asking questions of justice, please do not respond by accusations of division. Don't make the mistake. You certainly don't want to make the mistake that Gandhi did. Then we agree.
So this is what we need to do for that.
Great. Short question to you, Vati. Sir, you said on one hand, sir, the Supreme Court judgment on on the question of criminal is not, and on the other hand, sir, within the quota you support. So, sir, isn't it the implicit assumption within the judgment when we create subdivision that there will be a criminal layer because the set of determining the quota within the quota has to be then clear whether it is the economic basis or whether it will be the generational criteria. Since you only said that there is no significant representation there is no significant elite proportion within the SCs and all this history. So that is my short question. And sir, other thing I wanted to say, sir, we should be taught how to ask questions in the academy because sir, we don't know the art of asking questions, including me, sir. I'm trying to do every time, but this is where the journalists are better than us. Thank you, sir.
सब-categorisation की बात हो रही है, ये कहा जा रहा है कि बड़ी लड़ाई को छोड़ा जाता है. तो शेड्यूल कास्ट के विभिन्न में अगर हम देखें तो लोग कहते हैं कि जब भी पूरा मिलिट्राइज आर्गुमेंट है जो मूवमेंट बात करते हैं, कहते हैं झाड़ू लगाने वाला दलित है. लेकिन अगर इसी कैंपस में देखें तो झाड़ू लगाने वाला दलित के अंदर कौन है? जो झाड़ू लगाने वाला है उसमें से कैंपस में पढ़ने कोई नहीं आता है, उस टॉप पे बैठने कोई नहीं है. और जो इसके खिलाफ आर्गुमेंट दे रहे हैं कि दलित की एकता तोड़ी जा रही है, इस टॉप में ऐसे जितने एकेडमिक टॉप है उसमें सारे वही लोग बैठे हैं और वही आर्गुमेंट देते हैं कि पूरा दलित है. और सवाल मेरा ये है आपसे कि जिस तरह हम सब-categorisation की बात कर रहे हैं शेड्यूल कास्ट में, जिस तरह आपने इसको सपोर्ट किया, मैं भी आपको सपोर्ट करता हूँ कि डीयू में जो नौकरियां आई, चाहे एससी के अंदर, एसटी के अंदर या ओबीसी के अंदर, तो उनमें कुछ पर्टिकुलर कास्ट के लोग सारे पॉइंट हो गए. 5,000 साल ये सब अलग बात है, लेकिन फैक्चुअली बात यही है कि 2,000 नौकरियां जो निकली उसमें कुछ कम्युनिटीज को भागीदारी मिली और बहुत सारी कम्युनिटीज छूट गई. तो जो ओबीसी की बात हो रही है, ओबीसी में मैं यही वो हुआ है क्या ओबीसी के सब-categorisation की आप सपोर्ट में?
आपने बोला कि सब कैटेगराइजेशन में there is not a layer among the SC and ST category. You said droplets, मतलब एक droplets और layer है और एक thin pencil layer है, वो उसको अभी नहीं हटाना चाहिए, वो 30 साल बाद हटाना चाहिए. तो मेरा क्वेश्चन है कि सर अगर वो बना है तो बेनिफिशियरी जो रियल बेनिफिशियरीज है उनको सबसे ज्यादा फायदा उठाने के लिए उस लेयर को तो हटाना पड़ेगा ना, एटलीस्ट वन हैज बेनिफिटेड. तो आप उस लेयर को जैसे समय समय के साथ जब तक वो हटाते नहीं जाएंगे तो जो रियल बेनिफिशियरी है उनको नहीं मिलेंगे। और आपने यू सेड की और अगेंस्ट की अभी उसे नहीं हटाना चाहिए क्योंकि वो कंप्लीट लेयर नहीं है, पर एटलीस्ट अगर फ्रेंसी लेयर भी बन गया तो उसे तो हटाना तो नहीं सर, आपका इस पे क्या है?
It is, I think that to my mind is the most important issue. The issue of social justice in India is an issue of how do we expand the domain of social justice. How do we deepen the reach of policies of social justice?
And unfortunately, you see, what's happening is this, that because no other scheme of social justice delivers anything in this country, everything is an eyewash. The reservation of government jobs and education is the only thing that works. It's tangible, it's there, इससे कुछ मिलता है. So the entire burden of social justice is placed on this one tiny slice called reservation. No, nothing happens on land, nothing happens on the overall economy, and because of that, the pressure for उसमें slice within a slice within a slice. अब राजस्थान में इसका विवाद था कि 1% कोटा हो या 1.5% कोटा हो. You can laugh at it कि क्या कर रहे हो यार, but the fact is that 1 and 1.5 would have meant some 500 additional jobs. 500 लोगों की जिंदगी बदल जाती. So the real issue is how do we expand social justice remit? At the cost of advertising, I had written about all this about 14 years ago. There is an article in Seminar called Rethinking Social Justice, where I have said every single thing that I'm saying here. So I'm not coming with any fresh positions on this issue. And that's the burden of that argument is this. How do we expand rather than have this battle? But once this battle is here, how do you tackle it? You can't close your eyes to it. जो आप कह रहे हैं, मैं नहीं जानता आप किस वर्ग से हैं, लेकिन ये सवाल जमीन पर है. आप कहते हैं यूनिटी टूट जाएगी, मैं कहता हूं यूनिटी टूट चुकी है. Go to these places, speak to these people, speak to the most disadvantaged Dalit communities, ask them what they feel. And Arish bhai, they speak about the slightly less disadvantaged community as if they are speaking about Brahmins. And this is not some university professor or some intellectual. It is on the ground. So the only difference in our approach, right, while both of us are saying, yes, that's where we need to go, but how do you handle this small but real issue that has come up? I'm saying don't sidestep it. Straight away handle कीजिए. क्रीमी लेयर को आउट कर, क्रीमी लेयर की अवधारणा को स्वीकार मत कीजिए. सब कोटा को चुपचाप से सर झुका के स्वीकार कर लीजिए. आगे चलिए, रियल इश्यूज को एड्रेस कीजिए. That's my formulation of this. But it's a small difference. It's not a big difference, but today it might look like a very big difference. And it is. Let's face real small differences honestly. On OBC, what is my recommendation? Read it 10 years ago. I had said OBC at the national level must have sub-classification. It's been my position for years and years. Because more than SC में तो फिर भी आप कह सकते हैं कि there is one layer of homogeneity. OBC is a completely artificial sarkari construct which has three very different universes. There are peasant proprietors, there are artisan communities, there are service communities. They belong not just to different classes, they belong to different universe. And in the name of OBC reservation, the peasant proprietor communities they are the only ones to take advantage of that situation unless there is a splitting of that quota. So I have been advocating, put all the peasant proprietors, Yadav, Kurmi, Kudumbi, Okaligga, all of them in one category and put the artisanal communities in another category. And please also remember, there are some DNTs are part of OBC. The real life situation of DNTs is worse than average Dalits.
The Rohini Commission.
Yeah, that's right. So OBC must be split. I mean, not only can be split, I think for any social, I mean, state-wise it has been split almost in every single state. But nationwide quota of 27% to my mind is unjust. EWS, I must confess, I know that many students would have come out of that EWS quota in JNU. And I do not mean to comment on everyone's life situations. I'm sure most of them come from fairly disadvantaged category. But I do not support EWS reservation. I do not support the Supreme Court judgment about it for the following reasons. Number one, the logic of reservation is not economic disadvantage. Economic disadvantage is real, needs to be addressed. Economic disadvantage exists within every caste and community. It is gross, but reservation is not the way to tackle it. The problem again is this: nothing else works. तो उन्हें भी लगता है कि चलो मुझे भी अब रिजर्वेशन दो. कुछ भी इस देश में मिलना है तो रिजर्वेशन होगा, नहीं तो कुछ मिला ही. That's the problem. Otherwise, I do not think economic should be the logic. And what I really object to that judgment is that they say SC and ST will be excluded from EWS. I mean, on what basis? What is the logic? This I've never understood. To my mind, it is one of the most strange judgments of the Supreme Court. And the third thing that I do not understand is that for 50 years, Supreme Court has been telling me, give me evidence, show me evidence, bring me evidence, and rightly so. And that's why I actually welcome the Supreme Court jurisprudence on these things. But when it comes to EWS, Supreme Court doesn't ask for any evidence. Bhai, pucho na evidence. And the Supreme Court has been telling me for 40 years, 50% is the upper limit, no more than this. And the moment it comes to EWS, the court does not even discuss the issue of 50% cap. So what impression am I left with? कि भाई ये सारे rules वगैरह तो उनके लिए, अपने बच्चों के लिए बात कुछ अलग होती है. That is the problem. This is what I object to that judgment. I think it's one of the judgment which is waiting to be reviewed. On the creamy layer, why should even that spot not be removed? It's a very fair question. And I think we should, I'm glad you asked it, because we should face these questions openly in public. The logic of reservation presumes that in this society we do not just have individuals. In this society we have deeper social networks and connects. So if there is one person from a community who happens to have made it well, the reality is that that person will get his nephew from the village, usko Delhi le aayega, usko padhayega. So these tiny exceptional cases of people who have emerged above the water, they are the pulls for their own community. I don't want to chop off those pulls. I want those pulls to remain. It's a sociological argument. It's neither a moral argument, it's not a legal argument. And the second thing would be, yes, there would be some truly exceptional. I mean, this country, you can think of someone who is English educated for 5 generations and IAS for 3 generations. Why should that person get it? Probably not. For me, the criteria of denial would be this. Has that, in the case of OBC, the criteria of creamy layer is this. Do you have economic assets? Do you have economic privileges that can neutralize your educational disadvantages? In the case of Dalit, it has to be a very different question. Do you have status and privilege that can erase centuries of stigmatization? That is a question. It's a different question. So OBC and SC question are very different questions. And I think that's a question where some 1 or 2 generations advantage Normally doesn't. I can tell you stories of what IAS Dalit officers have to go through. Stigmatization in this country doesn't go very easily. So I would wait. All I'm saying is I would wait 20 more years. I see this formation. And the other question is, what is the cost of, and when you make a policy, the other question is, I'm making this policy for girls in JNU. Because the assumption is that they may be a little more insecure, not in JNU, but in other places. Now someone can always come up with a girl who is terrorizing everyone else in the hospital. But I would say in order to eliminate that one odd case, I would not change this policy because the cost of excluding her is higher than the benefits of the scheme. So that would be my argument in the case of why at this stage, I'm for creamy layer in the OBC case. I'm definitely for that, but not in the case of Dalits. Yes, have I answered the question? Sub-categorization ka or the criteria or the logic of sub-categorization and creamy layer is very different. In sub-categorization, the unit is jati, the whole jati. Either you are in the upper bracket or in the lower bracket. In the case of creamy layer, the unit is individual and family. In the case of sub-categorization, the logic, the criteria is educational and job opportunities. In the case of creamy layer, the criteria is economic advantage. इसलिए दो अलग अलग लॉजिक हैं और इसलिए मैं क्रीमी लेयर को अपोज करते हुए सब कैटेगराइजेशन को सपोर्ट कर सकता हूं. दोनों के लॉजिक अलग हैं. The Supreme Court is quite fair on this. They have said it should be based on evidence, as they have always asked. And to my mind, it would require two sets of evidence. One which is available, second which should not be very hard to gather. One is educational attainments of that particular jati for which data exists. Number two, representation in government jobs for which the data can be collected because वो फॉर्म में लिखा हुआ होता है. ये दो मेरे लिए सबसे रेलेवेंट चीजें हैं इसके बारे में.
My question, I wanted to talk about the last person. So you was telling that you were the last person, and Gandhi is the last person. So why you always hunt for the last person?
Why you always?
Why you always hunt for the last person? So let me tell you an instance that from my field work, there is a place. So पंचायत का इलेक्शन हुआ, तो उस विलेज में क्या था कि 50% आबादी जो थी वो चमार कास्ट की थी. तो बाकी जो सवर्ण जो है ना सब इकट्ठे हो गए, यादव भी, सतवड़ भी, पटिकुल भी. तो बोले कि चमार जो है ना हमको चैलेंज करेंगे, हमारी बात नहीं मानेंगे, जो रोड इनकी बस्ती में नहीं बनना चाहिए था वो ये बना लेंगे. तो वो क्या किए कि वो एक धोबी जो कास्ट है उसके दो परिवार थे, उसमें से एक को खड़ा किए और उसको जिताए. बगल वाले गांव में धोबी कास्ट की जनसंख्या ज्यादा थी, उसमें उन्होंने वाल्मीकि कास्ट के किसान को खड़ा किया और उसको जिताया, ताकि वो जो हमको चैलेंज कर रहा है, वो अपनी लाइफ में सुधार कर रहा है, वो हमको ना कर पाए. सो व्हाट इज योर पॉलिटिक्स? व्हाट इज जो सवर्णा का जो पॉलिटिक्स है ना कि ऑलवेज हंट फॉर द बिगेस्ट of the weak? Why you always ignore the weak? And
thank you. First of all, the organizers has come to you always. It is always fascinating to listen to Professor Yogendra Yadav, and also I admire your art of amusing the public through your oratory skills. So that is quite appreciated. And also as an advocate for the most marginalized, I really appreciate your zeal and your courage to stand up for that. But I have two questions, which is I am reiterating from the piece in Karman, which is written by that Mahadavi Sagar. You must be knowing the journalist in Karman. So he raised two questions regarding this subclassification, which I am going to ask you, like your reflection about it. The first question is that the court erroneous interpretation can undo the historical, the identity of the Dalits by excluding them from the benefits of the Dalits, as a reserve category. But what they will do with this identity, this is social and political. So this is the first question. The second question is political. This is also to understand the right-wing agenda. That he quotes, that's how Mr. Modi goes in Telangana state assembly election and says, appeals, that if you would elect our party, I would do this. And which is doing, like, that is being done by the judiciary itself. So we have to understand these judicial politics. So I was just trying to understand and wondering, like, where you locate yourself. Is it not the kind of also being the advocate of the right wing? Because they are also on the same line. And how do you differentiate when you say that you are the advocate of the most marginalized? Thank you so much.
Last, Hannah.
This is the last round.
Okay. I have two questions to begin with. Sure. So this is the first time to talk to them. So I would like to ask two questions. So I will take 2 minutes to explain, contextualize my question. When you talk about judgment, you're saying that judgment is welcome, and whatever thoughts judges have in your mind actually. And I would like to quote Ambedkar when he says that if society is corrupted, it can bribe, it can give bribe. But actually, Indian upper caste are antipathy to ex-untouchables. And you can see the narrative, the before judgment, even itself in JNU itself, most of the Indian upper caste, even particularly even Marxist itself, they always opposed reservations. Even when Mandal Commission came, even they opposed. Even wherever there is the power in the West Bengal, and you even remove SC/ST OBC commissions by saying that we don't believe in the caste. The moment you see even the judgment itself, judgment delivered, Sitaram Yechuri saying that we are welcoming the judgment, but he never talk about when reservation violated, when reservation not being implemented 100%. Even I would like to remember this Indian Marxist Dalits United Andhra Pradesh, where actually categorization movement was very strong. I was reading his article, he mentioned, though Mara communities are 1 or 2 or 3% advanced in the education and employment, but Indian Marxists never talked about reservation, they were supported, but when categorization came up, they all of a sudden come and supported. I mean to understand actually it is not that what actually judges have their mind, it's not quite different what actually they think and what actually delivered when it comes to the judgment, because I've seen your some of interviews when you put in when Chandrasekhar Rajan was also your panelist, you are agreeing with Chandrasekhar when most of the Dalit atrocities have taken place, most of the upper caste in the police station even they don't register in SC/ST atrocity cases also. I want to know actually even these people also born and brought up in the society also come up with a caste socialization. How do you look at, do you find any difference between when upper caste, opposing ex-untouchables, but when there is a rift needs to be created and all upper caste all of a sudden they come together and they support the particular, the problem. How do you look at it? Do you think that caste, just reflect in the judgment and whatever they practice that's quite different from the whole event? And one more thing you are point out into Mayawati. Mayawati now she should welcome and she says that yeah we enjoyed some sort of benefits, now other communities should come and give them opportunity, and you are putting all burden on the particular community who still fighting for their with their everyday problems. Why don't you ask Indian upper caste instead of Mayawati? For last 3,000 years we have been destroyed the lives of the marginalized communities, and if they never admitted in the public domain that we are come from these same communities where our forefathers destroyed the lives of Shudras and Shudra community. Do you think really when you quote Mayawati, Mayawati is the person who intentionally created kind of structure to oppress other SC communities who so far avail the reservation benefits? Why do you want to talk about Mayawati? Why don't you question the system and other upper caste?
Thank you. why do I always ignore the weak and go for the weakest? It's a very good question. It's asked to a wrong person. Because if I had all my life kept quiet about reservations and suddenly got excited about SC/ST sub-quota, then what you said would be true. कि भैया इतने साल सो रहे थे, आज तुम अचानक जाग उठे हो, तो तुम्हें इंटरेस्ट जस्टिस में नहीं है, तुम्हारा इंटरेस्ट है कि किसी तरह से उखाड़ो. That does not apply to me, as you know. है ना? तो जिस बंदे पे मतलब थोड़ा सा मतलब रॉन्ग नंबर डायल हो रहा है. Because if I had indeed bypassed the question of the weak, then of course what you say would be right. And I actually see this happening in many circles. सोशल मीडिया पे 2-3 दिन मैंने देखा कि जिनको कोई लेना देना नहीं है, जो जिंदगी भर सोशल जस्टिस को अपोज करते रहे, दे वर वेरी एक्साइटेड. और मैंने लिखा भी इस सवाल में, एक्साइटेड इसलिए थे कि चल कुछ तो उनका भी हो गया, चलो मियाँ की जूती मियाँ के सर. That was the kind of, मैंने लिखा है सब, मैं इसलिए बोल रहा हूँ. There was that kind of response and we should of course fight that response. Unless you show it, that probably doesn't apply to me. Second is about, I have not read that article by Sagar, so I would not be able to address that question of identity. I really do not see how this takes away identity. Probably I'm responding to your paraphrasing of someone else's argument, so it's an unfair response. I simply do not see how it takes away identity, their identity as Dalit. The serious question is about politics. No, let me just quickly respond to the question about Indian Marxists.
No, I mean to say that even
no, I got your question.
The ideologue, we always opposed.
I got your question.
What do they take interest?
I've heard your question. As you probably know, I'm not a Marxist. Have never been a Marxist.
Just I want to know your opinion on that.
I think Indian Marxism needs many the more I distance myself now for these things. When I was in JNU, I was part of that group which for the first time defeated SFI. You know, no, not free thinkers. We were in Samta Yujan Sabha, which was a socialist group, which existed for a few years. But now that I distance, in fact, my respect and admiration for the left for the Marxists has increased over the years. What do I blame them for? I blame them for, I increasingly feel that their practice was not so bad. Their theory was completely wonky. I think Marxists completely misunderstood Indian society. Their inability to, there was any somewhat open-ended application of Marxism in India, they should have begun with caste. And the denial of caste for so many years, for which they have now overcompensated. But then, if you don't do it for 50, 60, 70 years, so that's a serious error on the part of Marxists. And yes, some Marxists also shared a very upper caste social universe. I have seen that in Bengal particularly. The Bengali Bhadralok, which could put on a Marxist color as well. But that was very upper caste Bhadralok, that is true. So, but these are observations from outside. I'm not a Marxist, so you need to get someone better to defend them. Among the Gandhians, you are absolutely right. Among the Gandhians, there has increasingly been, if I look at the post-Gandhi Gandhians, the sheer upper caste dominance, and not just sociological, their moral universe was a universe of the Hindu upper caste. So you are absolutely right about Gandhians. So many ideologies, and that's precisely why they have declined in this country, because they failed to address some of the critical issues of this country. On Mayawati ji, why do I put the onus on her? I put only one onus on her. about Dalit solidarity. Everything else, no. I mean, I should not be misunderstood. Why do I put onus on Ambedkarites? When we speak of Dalit solidarity, then the onus is on us. We cannot say that upper caste of this country produce Dalit solidarity. It's none of their business. That has to be done either by those who are Dalits or those who have taken strong social justice position throughout their life. The onus is on them. It cannot be on anyone else. So that is the only limited onus I put. I really do believe that if Mayawati ji or someone of her stature had taken this public position, without, I mean, I don't want anyone to say we have oppressed them. Of course, no one has oppressed them. There has been differential opportunity, and that others who have got less need some slight protection to ensure that they get what they deserve. If someone of the stature of Mayawati ji had said that, it would have contributed to solidarity. That's the only thing I'm saying. Which is connected to the question of politics. What is your politics, comrade? I would invite all the comrades to look at the ground. The world does not begin today. A lot of caste politics has already taken place within Dalits. Please tell me which is the state where BJP has not encroached upon the most marginalized Dalits. Have they not? Haryana, they've done it. Uttar Pradesh, they've done it. Bihar, they've done it. In Bengal, BJP's entry through that. Mala Madiga question, BJP and others, and the person representing Madiga movement is now in BJP. What does it tell you? We can draw two very diametrically different conclusions from this. Oh my God, BJP is into this shady game. Why are we supporting it? The other question can be, what were we doing for the last 30 years? Did we not know that this was happening? All these people the communities have moved towards BJP, and why? Because they felt that those who practice and preach social justice in this country do not care for them. This is the sense they had. और ये मैं मन से नहीं कह रहा हूं, यहां बैठ के नहीं कह रहा हूं, इतना सुना है मैंने, अगर बताऊं तो हम कई लोगों के सर शर्म से झुक जाएंगे. वो लोग क्या कहते हैं जमीन पे सोशल जस्टिस वालों के बारे में, दलित बीएसपी के बारे में क्या कहते हैं, वो अगर आप सुने. So please, and this is again, BJP is now also doing pasmanda politics among Muslims. So should we stop raising the pasmanda question because BJP is now raising it? Or should we even aggressively address the pasmanda question before BJP manages to capture them? That is my politics. My politics is about creating a social block of the bottom of the pyramid in this country. And my reaction to this SCS judgment is not just an incidental off the cuff reaction. It is part of an overall political design. The design is that in this country, if you want to save the republic, if you want to save constitution, if you want to save democracy, the only way is to create a social block of the bottom of the pyramid in this country. And BJP's only strategy is BJP has captured the upper half of the pyramid, and BJP takes away slices from the bottom. The only way is for you and me to foreground this question, reach there before the BJP or RSS reaches, or even if they've already reached, fight them out. But that you can do not by avoiding these questions, not by accusing them of division, but by saying, yes, I should have addressed it 30 years ago. I'm sorry, I'm late, but we'll do it, and these people are doing it only in order to fool you. They would actually make you slaves of the Varna system. We are in a real radical social justice politics. That should be our response, and this is the response to which I would like to invite all of you.